it, man. I tried to figure out the the issues, but let's see. I'm gonna go to that Elgato prompter. Looks like we're gonna have to just rough it out with the computer audio. Let me know how it sounds to y'all. I know the audio's coming through. I would have loved to be on my actual microphone, and it was working all the way up until this point. I'm trying a new setup here. Um, where I'm able to just look dead into the camera. So I know the audio may be a little room noisy. It's not as clear and full as I normally like to have my lives. But maybe if I use my AirPods, maybe it'll sound, I don't know, less roomy. Um, let's see this. Audio input capture. We'll see if this works. Test one, two. Maybe that'll sound a little better. I'll just keep the AirPod in my ear and we'll just chat like this. Welcome. welcome. I would love to kind of address some. If possible to watch the live again later. Yes, I will leave this live up. You ain't ready. You ready, but the audio ain't ready for holding the gems that'll come out of your mouth. I hope so. Listen, I'm here. I'm just here to have open conversation with people that have been following, and hopefully people can also, push back, ask questions. If you have questions about some of the recent videos I've dropped, what's going on? Reiki. Hopefully, I'm pronouncing that correctly. What up, Mary? Um, yeah, it was better before without the AirPod. Okay. I'm such a perfectionist with this stuff, and I really want to be great. We're going to keep. I need this thing to live more, so that way I can have the repetitions in. Try to do this more regularly, so that I can work out the kinks, and we'll get better and better as it goes. I would love to pull up one of these videos that I've done recently, and the comment section that I get, and maybe that will spark some of the conversation that we can have today, and I'll be able to reply in live timing. Let's do that. I'll even put them over here. Let's do that. Let's do that real quick. Awesome, great. So these were held for review. Let's do this here. Mentions, published. Got it. So on my recent video, I've done a couple of recent videos. One of them being Christians be gaslighting people, and I also did one about would I ever follow Jesus again. That one has seemed to hit the algorithm a little better than usual, and so I've gotten a lot of Christians that have offered some pushback, but not even genuinely pushback. It's more like I'm pushing back about the fact that I don't agree with you, but they're not saying specifically what. Someone said, "Bro, absolutely love the music, man. Been listening to your music to learn how to sing in places since I was 12." Uh, okay. How old are you? Because I don't know if I've been teaching that long. Someone said, "Stop holding back on this." So yeah, let me read some of the comments that have happened on this channel, and maybe that'll spark some conversation about where I stand. And what I've essentially said was in this video is, uh, hey, I see the beauty of faith. I'd even like to have faith, and even faith in Jesus is on the table, though I don't think that it would look anywhere near mainstream. It would probably be much more universalist, much more liberal, very, very open-handed, but it's on the table. It would just look very differently. I would have to acknowledge the rational arguments that don't get you across the finish line. And I've been having a lot of conversation with people in my life. One in particular. People always say that I don't. Uh, Somebody said the audio is better with the AirPod. Okay, do I have to like make a poll or something? Start a poll. AirPod audio or computer? It's computer right now, so we'll go with AirPod and then we'll computer audio. Jeez, I cannot type. Okay, let's do that. Let's just vote. I think the all right, this is computer audio. I believe the AirPod audio probably sounds a lot better. And this is, oh, come on, man. This would be the AirPod audio. Yeah, it was best when I'm facing the camera. I'm not going to face the camera. I would love to look dead in the camera so this has a little better replay value. And I can read I have the chat right in front of me so I can look into the camera and still respond to people. 60% says AirPods, 58% says AirPods, 54% says 57. It's looking slightly in the wind. Put your comments in. We're going to let this thing run out in about 10 seconds. 10. Put your vote in. 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. We're keeping the AirPods. 62% says keep the AirPod. So please, this is supposed to be interactive. So I'm trying to kick off the conversation, but please leave some comments in the. I'm going to go ahead and end this voting now. Now everybody's voting. Now you missed your chance. Don't try to vote for it now. You missed your chance. We're ending the poll. AirPods won by a narrow margin. Only 18 votes in, but enough to choose. So the AirPods have less echo. Exactly. That's what I'm saying. I really wish this microphone right here was work. I don't know why OBS doesn't want to take the microphone. I don't like that YouTube Studio forces you to use a third-party program to stream. I think it would be better if they had more. They don't force you to, but I just wish there were more options within the studio. I think we wouldn't have this many problems. But I get that I have a lot of people that are Christians following me, and it makes me reconsider how I approach this channel because I really didn't start it for Christians, and yet I guess because I keep talking about Christian things, I only attract very pro-Christian people. Not only, but largely attract very pro-Christian people, and these are people who kind of only see it one way. And I sort of addressed in my last video last weekend that I put out that Christians be gaslighting people. And instead of being able to sit with the conversation, they'd rather just tell people, hey, you're not thinking right. You're in sin. You hate God. And I partly agree, not with the hate God part. I agree, which is kind of what I've been saying. And I think people are so hitched on the fact that I disagree with them that they sort of miss the nuance of the conversation. I'm someone who says that rational arguments for the existence of God, for the resurrection, for the validity of the reliability of the Bible, particularly the New Testament, any other spiritual claim or religious claim that you want to make, I believe that at its furthest conclusion, I'm not saying you can't make any rational arguments for God or any rational arguments for Christianity or any rational arguments for the resurrection. That's not what I'm saying at all. What I'm saying is take any of those rationale to its furthest conclusion, it will not gradually turn into faith. These are primarily worldview oppositions. You are making, and even that it really comes down very subjectively. You can make arguments for supernaturalism. I'm not someone who is a staunch materialist or naturalist. I would never say that a supernatural world is impossible. or that it does not exist, God can't exist, or supernatural entities or powers cannot exist. I would not say that at all. I'm saying, for me, it's on the table. It would just take much more subjective, personal, existential steps to get there. It won't just be rationale. I'm not saying that I've followed every breadcrumb trail for any rational argument for Christianity. I'm not saying that at all. But I can confidently say that I have gotten to the weeds way more than the average person, whether the average Christian or average non-Christian. I strongly believe, and I don't say that with any arrogance. If anything, it's kind of shows how obsessed I am with the conversation itself. I've dug into the weeds more than the common person, and I'm a layman. I'm not a scholar. I'm just someone who is genuinely intrigued by the conversation. And after, I think my first time really wrestling in any formal way or detailed sort of studied and reading books and stuff like that, my first time really engaging with the rational arguments for and against Christianity probably started in 2009. So it's been about 15 years, with obviously some higher peaks in certain years where I'm like really into it. I prob so I mean, books on books on books, podcasts, a little bit of seminary. I've really been in the weeds of it, and I've come to the conclusion that I don't think another decade of it is another decade of rational arguments is going to make that journey any simpler. I think it just gets more complicated. The more you get into the weeds, you start picking out very, very detailed minutia, even just around the resurrection. And I think that that's a peculiar thing that if you really want to make a rational argument for the existence, I think the only way that you could do it seems like you have to have a PhD in this stuff. I'm not a PhD. And if you're not going to be a PhD in it, and there's a lot of PhDs who scatter across the board for or against resurrection, for or against the existence of God, all across the spectrum and even somewhere in between. It boils down to not about how learned you are, how studied you are, how well read you are. It is I think it's just a matter of faith. That's my point. My point is that it will, at the end of the day, be um, a matter of faith. And I'm really surprised that Christians have such pushback against that. Because, and I'll get to questions in just a second, because I feel like that's a core element of the Christian doctrine, is that you are saved by faith alone. I think it's even Second Corinthians chapter 1. It says, you were those who are weak and despised in the world, who are not considered wise in the world. All that stuff. Like, there's worldly wisdom and there's spiritual wisdom, and you can't get it through purely natural means. Y'all kind of want the cake and eat it too. You're like, oh no, you're right. It's only supernatural. We can only get there through rational means, but it is objective. We can only get there through supernatural means, but it is objective. It's not objective. It takes if it takes a supernatural experience with the Holy Spirit, that is a subjective experience. That rational arguments may buttress, may support, may supplement faith, but it won't get you there. It just won't. I don't. That's why I'm trying to make sort of detailed, coherent, I guess as an outsider, I'm trying to give explanation for that phenomenon. But I feel like Christians within the faith, I feel like I'm just saying what you believe in a mirrored sort of way. But when I say it, it's like, oh no, your rationale is all wrong. You just hate God. You disagree. I'm actually surprised also that Christians, and I don't think I'm exaggerating. There's a lot of Christians who've been really supportive and really open, but I think it's kind of split. I think there are a lot of people, I can't give specific numbers, but there's a lot in my comments and messages I get. I think I'd say
a large chunk of you are like, yeah, absolutely, I agree. I definitely see that. You can make rational arguments for it, but at the end of the day, it is a supernatural faith thing. And then there are others who are just totally like looking to, I don't know, be contrarian, I guess. I think it because and I'm about to read the comments very soon because I would love to hear some of your perspectives on this. I don't get why in my last couple of videos, I don't get where the controversial things are that I'm saying. I think what I'm saying is that I'm promoting, if anything I'm promoting is more modesty as a religious person and a non-religious person, modesty in what you know and what you don't know. To just be say, you know what, I don't know. I am making a step of faith in this. I am making a step of faith. I think that I can make some pretty solid arguments that support where I am. I think that I think I'm a well-thinking person. I'm intellectual, and I can make some strong arguments for the case of the resurrection, for the case of the existence of God and Jesus. But it is faith. It is faith. Rationality can only get you so far in either direction. I'm saying, even through my own subjective experience outside of Christianity, I'm saying that cold-hearted, refrigerated rationality, just plain, pure, unadulterated rationality, only gets you so far when it comes to creating meaning and fulfillment in the world. At some point, you have to, at many points, at certain launching points, you have to sort of abandon it and go with your feelings, go with your gut. And I acknowledge that. I'm just saying both sides, I'm saying both are doing it. I just think that I'm not trying to pit one against the other. I'm saying they both have their place in the world. Rationality and irrationality, absurdity, have their place in the world. And I'm trying to find as much within my own limited human finite existence and very limited intelligence, trying to find the balance in that. So, all right, let's skim through some of these. All right, let's go. Let me scroll up. Let's get into it. Could be wrong, but I don't see you going full blown atheist. Would you consider yourself more agnostic? Yeah, I'm not a full blown atheist at all. Um, I think I tend to see the world through natural means, to have natural explanations, but I think it's also a spectrum. I think that many Christians do. Like, you go to the doctor and get your checkups and you take vaccines or medication because to some degree you have a naturalist worldview. You think that there are natural remedies, natural answers for natural problems. You know that. There were those religious people at one point in human history that believed that epilepsy was demonic possession. We know now that it's not really a demonic thing. More so, it is things that are happening, misfirings that are happening in the brain that have natural explanations and natural remedies. And you can still believe in God and still believe in supernatural healing while also understanding that there are very natural explanations. I think I may just take it further than many religious people. I think there are more natural explanations than for things than Christians give credit for. But I would never. I think for me to full on say that God does not exist, or a supernatural entity, the supernatural world does not exist at all, simply because my experience doesn't give enough support for it. I think that's extremely, to me, I think it's intellectually arrogant and makes too much of my own intelligence, and I know that I'm extremely limited. So I think the most honest place to put myself is very agnostic. So, with the openness to faith, with the desire to have something a bit more solid in experience, in subjective experience, in my own personal subjective experience, that would tip me to the side of believing and following in faith. Um, I'm curious to know what you think of Jesus now. Who was he? I just did a video about this, but I'll answer again. I'm curious what you think about Jesus now, who he was, and what made him so significant. I don't my where I'm at now. Anything I say right now about what I believe about anything is not me saying that there's not more to know, that I know everything, or that this is where I'll always be. I'm speaking about what I currently know, what I'm currently persuaded about, and where I'm currently at right now. So let me just go ahead and give that pretext to that. As I've said in the video, I do believe that Jesus was an historical person. I don't believe that he was made fully out of myth. I had one person comment and say that, you know, the New Testament, the Bible is just like Lord of the Rings. It's just all made up novel. It's not. Do I believe that a lot of things could very well have been exaggerated, misremembered, added in later? Yes. But do I believe it's made out of whole cloth? Or I believe it's just made out of thin air? Absolutely not. I do believe that Jesus was a historical person. He was an apocalyptic Jew who saw there being a sort of climax to time and space as we know it, and he was at the center of that in his followers' minds, and possibly and likely in his own mind, that he was the center of the apocalypse. And he was someone took issue with me calling Jesus a cult leader, but just hear me out. I think having issue with that is very it shows the Christian bias. And not, if you think about how Christianity started versus any other version of a larger religion, Christianity does start out as a cult. And how do we define that? In the sense of, you have this charismatic leader that is following a larger, more orthodox faith. He sees himself as the ultimate prophet, come from God to save the world, and you can only be saved through him. His followers are willing to die for him. He is speaking things that hinge on Judaism, but are very different than Judaism. And it's a very small, in comparison to what Judaism was, it is very small and very new. I don't know how, in just purely natural terms, I don't know how that's not a cult. So I think he was a revolutionary of sorts that broke out of Judaism. He was killed by the Roman government for being a political insurrectionist, claiming to be king of the Jews. And he had followers that eventually, shortly after he died, believed that he was no longer dead, that people began to claim to see him. And why he is so important now, I think, how to explain how someone from such a very small, because Judaism, Christianity, followers of Jesus, in comparison to others for the first 100 years or so, it's not a very significant. He is not the only one who's been crucified by Rome as a Jewish leader. Where I'm at right now with it, I think sometimes we underestimate how very small things can turn to be significant, as if we assume that this was the only route that things could have gone. But with Jesus, we know that his following grew. I think that the teachings of Jesus boded very well with the poor class in Rome. We know it grew in popularity, but it eventually got outlawed. But here's another misconception, is that there was some widespread persecution of Christians in the first century, and there wasn't. Christianity was perfectly legal until about around 300. I think 302 or something like that, and then it was outlawed in Rome for 10 years, and then at the end of that outlawing, it became the official religion of the Emperor Constantine took it on as his own personal faith, made it the state religion of the largest powerhouse in the world. So, yeah, I think that for me, as I consider, I think that has a lot of explanatory power as to how Christianity um, can grow and Jesus becomes so significant, coming from relatively insignificant um, origins. So, all right. Do your parents still try to convince you to become a Christian again? Not really. Not really. Why'd you leave seminary? I was going to seminary in Houston. I felt like God called me at the time to Chicago, and the seminary that I was at didn't have a branch in Chicago, and so it just ended there. I'm kind of glad that I didn't continue, but yeah, that was literally it. Like I was in seminary for about a year and a half, but a half-time student, not a full-time student. So a year and a half doesn't get you a lot of courses. But then I went to Chicago. So okay, there's a lot. Okay, y'all are in here now. I was trying to wait for y'all to. Now y'all are really, y'all are really throwing these in here. Okay, okay. Well, scientifically, we only see 1% of the universe. So what else can be explained in 99% that's unseen? Maybe spirit. I don't know how you quantify that about what, because if 99% was unseen, then how do we know it's 99%? We'd have to see it to know that it was 99%. So I don't know. I don't get what I do believe that there's a possibility. We know that there's a horizon. We are limited by the speed of light. And so there is, as the universe expands, there is a portion of the universe that we just can't account for. We just simply cannot see it. How much of what we see in the visible universe is part of the whole pie versus how much we can't see? I I don't know. I don't think scientists claim to know either. But what we can see within the visible universe is about 100 billion galaxies, which is nuts. Okay. I think what you're saying about faith, rationality, Holy Spirit encounter is fair. Thank you. I'm trying to be fair. I'm trying to be. What do you think about practicing Christianity as a humanitarian thing? I deconverted about 3 years ago, but I find myself drawn back because of communal humanitarian aspect of the faith. Absolutely. I think there are a lot of utilitarian uses for religion as a whole, and specifically Christianity. Um, I don't, as I said on this channel before, I don't think usefulness equates truthfulness. I think many people make a case for Christianity. See, Christianity gave us all these, beautiful things to human culture and stuff, and this is why it's helpful. And yeah, I have no disagreement with that. I think that clearly, from a social evolutionary standpoint, if religion in general was not good for humans, it wouldn't have continued. Clearly, there was some um, huge benefit. I won't go into the details right now, but I think there are many huge benefits for human flourishing that comes from religion, and it continues to this day. I think we're also just wired in a way to be religious, and I don't think that the last recent part of human history where we postmodernism and modern science and enlightenment and all that, I don't think that is going to completely undo millions of years of evolution, or you can even say billions, depending on where you want to starting point at. But as far as humans go, I don't think that undoes the millions of years of creating myths and fiction and community around those myths and fictions. So I think religion is here to stay in some form or another for a very long time. Okay. Religion instills a serious fear of asking questions, which is why people get so upset. I do believe that that's oftentimes when people don't want to engage with me on a rational level. Is like, well, you have to just deal with hell. This is because you don't want to deal with God, and God's going to, okay, you'll see all them reasonable, rational arguments making now. You're not going to be able to make that at Judgment Day. So deal with that. It's like, Okay, okay. Um, Someone said, I like that point for myself. I find that the rational element is more of an opener to someone to conversation. I loved exploring the rational points myself, but yes, at the end of the day, it is faith. Absolutely. I think a lot of fundamentalist circles see faith as a completely black and white thing. So even arguing for some of the middle ground balance would oppose that view. Uh, yeah, I'm just now. People keep throwing this out for a minute, talking about Eastern Orthodox religion, Orthodox Christianity, and I'm ashamed to say that I haven't given it as much consideration as I should have before. And as I've been recently diving into the differences between Western rationalist religion, Christianity, which would include uh, Roman Catholicism and um, Protestantism that came out of it, I think the huge difference is what I'm gathering so far, my very early understandings of this. The huge difference is the Eastern perspective of allowing a lot more room for mystery versus the very rational, systematic approach to theology from um, our Roman Catholic church fathers and Protestant folks who really want to make sure everything lines up rationally versus being like, you know what, this is what we think the Bible says. Now, I'm not saying the Eastern Orthodox is right about everything. I don't know, but I am very attracted to that idea that I don't know, we don't know, and leaving room for that. So, okay. Can you say more about your engagement with existentialism? Has any of that work affected your view of Christianity for the better? Have you engaged with Paul Tillich or other Christian existentialists? No, I have not engaged with any other Christian existentialists. Only Christian existentialist I've involved myself with is Kierkegaard. Um, you could say Nietzsche is a sort of existentialist, complete opposite of Kierkegaard. Sartre, Camus. I'm somewhat familiar with these people, but none of them are Christian. But how I think existentialism, as far as I understand it now, being that your existence precedes your essence, essentially, meaning that I think this sort of reverse Aristotelian view for the longest was that you have an essence that is made, that is eternal, that before you got here, or there's a teleology, uh, a purpose, something that you're headed towards that's already set out for you before you exist, and you have to find your way to that purpose. Existentialism reverses that and says that you exist and you must figure that thing out. There's an infinite abyss of choices to make, and it is all very subjective, and everyone must make that journey on their own. And I quite like that. Um, I call myself an existentialist, not in some all-encompassing thing, but that in a way that I think it does give some language around how I tend to see the world. That yeah, everyone must stand, as my pastor used to say growing up. Every top got to stand on its own bottle, and you've got to figure that thing out on your own. And any choice that you make uh, cannot be found simply in the rational world. Any decision you make about your life cannot be found or mediated in the rational realm, but rather it is a choice that you must make within yourself. Um, it is a subjective experience. Now, Christians, you may invoke the Holy Spirit helping along with it, however you want to describe that. It still is a subjective, personal, existential experience. So, and I actually see that as a plus in terms of faith, not something that goes against it. You can go either way. You can go Kierkegaard or you can go the Nietzsche way. But yeah, did you wrestle with Reformed theology when you were a Christian? It caused me to begin deconstruction at one point in my life. Yes, I was very into Reformed theology. But the seminary that I went to was Reformed Theological Seminary. I was very Calvinist for a very short bit, but yes. Joe, have you listened to the podcast premiere Unbelievable? Yes, a lot. I've watched it a lot. I like the fact that the host tries to be as unbiased as possible. But yeah, I've definitely watched a lot of their stuff. Sorry if I'm asking a question you already answered, but do you still believe in the supernatural? I don't believe in the supernatural. I'm not here to make a case. I don't have a strong case for the supernatural in my own personal experience. I'm saying I would never take it off the table. Um, so for me to say I don't believe in the supernatural is not the same as saying is I believe it doesn't exist. Does that make sense? The two to me are not the same. To say, yeah, to say I don't believe in God is not the same thing as saying I believe God does not exist. Sounds similar, but I think they're, I think the nuance between those two statements is where the agnostic exists, in my perspective. I saw another question up here. Uh, do you think trying to rationalize God, knowing He is outside our natural world and we will not fully comprehend Him, is a strong argument to say, I don't believe in the God of the Bible? Uh, I don't think I'm not sure I quite understand the question. Um, hey, do you think the natural and supernatural are completely separate or can they exist? Again, I don't make any arguments for supernatural, so I don't know if I can explain how I do. In my mind, I can see them coexisting, um, parallel worlds. I think there's a lot of natural arguments for parallel natural worlds, not just parallel natural and supernatural. So if there can be parallel natural worlds, sure, there can be parallel supernatural and natural worlds. So, um, do you think the Bible is fake or that it's real in a different way? Like, do you still believe in God or somewhere else now? Okay, so do I believe I believe, I kind of put it this way. I believe that a lot of the Bible and just religious thought in general, not just the Bible, I believe that things can be literally false and figuratively true. So I think there's a lot of things that we read in the Bible or religious texts that resonate with us, and we say, "Man, I see that to be a true thing." Particularly something like Proverbs, and where it says stuff like, "A soft word turns away wrath." I don't know if I need divine inspiration for that to be true. I think that that's I think that that's a I think that's a true thing, and that's also, I guess, true in a literal sense. Let me give a better example of something that can be figuratively true and literally false. As it stands now, I'm not convinced that you can have any rational argument for the resurrection, but I do like the idea that I think there is something truthful that resonates with this idea of resurrection. I love this phrase. I kind of tweaked it from somebody else. I made it myself. I think he said that, Emmaus Road never happens, it always happened. I applied it to the resurrection. The resurrection never happened. The resurrection always happens. And that is to say that, man, even post Christianity, I've seen the ways that I can go through a type of death. And I don't think that the Bible leaves resurrection simply to a figurative, a literal sense. That yes, it makes the argument in the New Testament that Christians will be literally raised from the dead, but there are also figurative applications to the resurrection in that you be resurrected now, that even before your physical resurrection, that you are already born again, that you already have new life, that the kingdom of God has already come in a figurative sense and it'll come in a literal sense. So I think even the Bible tradition will give me some playroom for that. But yes, I believe um, that there is something to this idea of of needing to rise again. That you may be buried, but you you can find new life, and the new person that you become looks a lot like the old version of you, but it comes with new qualities, just like the resurrected Jesus looked very much like the old dead Jesus or prior to death Jesus, but he comes with very new, distinct qualities, such as the power of flight, as Michael Scott would say. But yeah, I think things can be literal. I think there's a lot of things to gain from the Bible in a very figurative sense. So, whew, okay. I hope you find the answers you're looking for. I remember your vids when I was a freshman in high school and your Christian vids. Thanks. And I appreciate the heart behind it. I do get that comment a lot. And can I break that down for a second? When people say, "I hope you get the answers you're looking for," it kind of goes back to the point that I was making before. Is I think, and there's a presupposition that I had as a Christian as well, that if you just read enough, if you study enough, you'll eventually get enough rational answers to give you faith. And I now, um, as it stands today, categorically um, reject the notion that if I just get enough rational arguments, um, I'm interested in a type of faith that relies wholly other, completely separate from rationality. That they run sort of parallel, and they may speak to each other along the way, but neither one of them is trying to cut the other person off and say, no, you can't keep going. Your rationality stops here and I'll keep going in your lane, or vice versa. Your faith stops here and now our rationality keeps going. I think they both keep going, and they can yell at each other across the lanes like, hey, yo, I just learned this. And hey, I learned, okay, cool, cool. And they keep going on their paths. And maybe in some other realm beyond or I'm sorry, human understanding, they eventually meet together, kind of like a sphere. You think about, do I have a sphere near me? I think that's probably an interesting analogy. Um, I don't have anything that is ball-like here, but you know that if two people start off on parallel points on a sphere, and we are on a sphere, we're on Earth, and it may seem like you are running parallel to one another, and parallel means that they will never meet up. If they were to continue to going infinitely in space, they would never meet up. Those are truly parallel lines that they never cross each other. But on a sphere, no matter how parallel you think you are, eventually at the North Pole, they meet up. Just like, on a globe. I actually do have a globe. Perfect. In our very limited experience, if I am on the continent of America and I were to see these parallel lines going through America, and me and you were on one of these lines, we could very much say we're both running parallel to one another. But we're not truly parallel because all points eventually meet at the North Pole, which, by the way, cool thing to think about. The North Pole doesn't have a time zone, and yet it is all time zones at the same time. So there's some parallel truth, right? Like we all have our own time zones. We're not in the same time zone, but at the North Pole, you are simultaneously in all time zones and yet at no time zone at all. And maybe that's a metaphor of what ultimate knowledge is in some other realm beyond our comprehension. Is that things, rationale and faith, can run parallel to each other, and yet at some point they meet in a place where they are no time zone and all time zone at the same time, all rationality, but not rational at all. Maybe that's just a thought that I'm having currently. So yeah. Uh, let's see. If we're all parallel, there will be no God or no one we have to submit to. I don't know what that. Maybe maybe rewind the point that I was trying to make. uh, let's see. I want to make sure I'm getting to these questions. Where is my chat at? I'm assuming it's still going, but I don't see it. I think we're still good. Okay, cool. Um, let's see. Do you think having someone like you during your Christian journey would have helped faith or caused you to become more weak in faith? I don't know. I think it would cause someone. I think my whole thing is. I think it's hopefully it's been clear that even on this channel, I've never made any um, attempt to try to make someone less Christian or not have faith. Mm, It's very, my evangelistic purpose is a little different these days than it was when I was a Christian. When I was a Christian, I was trying to get people to be more and more Christian. I think my evangelistic purpose now, maybe if I had a purpose, an aim, a goal underneath all that, is modesty and humility in how we approach knowledge, whether that be knowledge that is informed by faith or lack thereof, because we're just so limited, man. And so I actually have a friend who has went to seminary now. He's got his master's degree at a very conservative institution, and then went to a much more liberal, more broad um, school. Not even liberal, just more like expansive in the type of wisdom that can be shared there. Like it's not limited to just fundamental or progressive theology. It's kind of like all perspectives can have an equal footing if they can make a solid argument for it. So I kind of appreciate that. And he actually went through his own huge deconstruction and crisis of faith and was losing, just like really struggling. And ironically, me, the agnostic, was there encouraging him to continue to have faith. That I think is a good thing that all his paradigms of who Jesus was and who God is being called into question, but yet you don't have to go into despair. There is room for faith. I think I told him a faith that is rigid can break. Like you don't want a faith that is rigid in any sense. Like if it's too thin, then it can snap. And if it's really thick, but it's still rigid, eventually it will snap. It just may take a little longer to snap, but it will snap. And when it does, it will be much more painful. And it's kind of like muscles on a body, right? You can get as strong as you want and get strong, but if those muscles are not, and those tendons are not elastic and they cannot stretch and bend, you are, injury is all but inevitable. It's just a matter of time at that point. You keep tightening up those muscles and getting stronger, but it has no place to bend and be flexible, you're going to get injured. But at the same time, if you're too flexible and no muscle at all, and you go up against things, you'll still break. You're too small. So there's some middle ground of being extremely strong and extremely flexible that gives you longevity. And that's kind of what I was trying to encourage in him. So maybe I've encouraged him to be. But I think that's the modesty that I would like people to have in general, is that, and I think Christians maybe they're able to be okay with rational arguments that go against their faith and natural explanations of things that may go against their fundamentalist presuppositions about their faith, and yet they're still able to continue strongly in faith because their faith was not solely contingent upon everything making rational sense. And so they're strong, but they're also extremely flexible versus someone who's extremely flexible within their faith, but they're not very strong. They can't make any strong arguments or conversations within the sort of intellectual conversation around faith. So, um, Hold up. Last question. Uh, and if you answer, I'll catch it on the replay. How do you feel about Christians and other faiths saying they'll pray for you, even in a non-return to faith sort of way? I don't mind people saying they'll pray for me. I do get a little, if I'm honest, I get a little annoyed when people tell me that they're praying for me to return to faith. I pray that you'll find, and I'm like, well, just pray then at that point. I don't want to hear it, but I'm sure if God exists, he hears it. I don't need to be aware of the prayer for the prayer to work. So just do it. Like you don't have to keep telling me I'm praying for you. Because if I'm honest, it does come off a bit condescending and a bit pitying in a very pious way. Like, oh, I'm praying for you. Like, or even and some people say it intentionally that way, intentionally sort of condescending, like the sort of Southern saying of, oh, bless your heart. They use the I'll be praying for you in the very same sense. Like, oh, I'm okay. I'm praying for you, bro. And it's like, are you? You don't you don't have to make me aware. So resurrection could also be quite literally cloning. I think you only need one cell to clone the whole person. God could take all of his children from the grave and give them life in the process like Egyptians. Maybe. I have no opinions on how any type of full scale resurrection would work. But sure. Or just revive. I mean he can do it any way that he wants to. So I think it would have to, especially for people who are Christians who died and like were blown to pieces or something like that. And there's not like a full body to resurrect. They were cremated or something. Like, yeah, I think you'd have to get kind of creative. So, which is why I believe a lot of Christians for religious reasons were really against cremation for a long time. Um, what do you envision that new faith being? Like, how will you know you've arrived at what you hope for? I don't think I'll ever want to arrive at any particular point. I think that's the beauty of where I'm at now, and why I'm so open to talking about faith with people, even Christians. Me and Ruslan. I think one day we're talking about it now. Me and Ruslan, if you're familiar with him, he has a pretty big YouTube channel now. I eventually will be on his. We'll have a public conversation. Notice I said conversation, not debate. I'll look forward to that. We had lunch about a week ago, and we text and converse a lot, which is why I think it's so funny. He's not the only one that I do that with, but I think it's so funny when people comment and they're like, "I can tell you don't talk to people who have these same sort of thought. You don't talk to other Christians who can challenge you and push you back." I'm like, me and Ruslan be going at it in the voice memos. We be sending each other like 3, 4 minute long voice memos, like, "Nah, man, so you're not thinking about it this way." Da 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 da. And we disagree very strongly on a lot of issues. We agree very strongly on a lot of issues. And at the end of the day, we also both deeply respect each other. And I think people need to get better at doing that, of being able to deeply, strongly disagree with someone while not disparaging them, without disrespecting them or dehumanizing them, but seeing them as a full human that's having and also understand that the other person may have more wisdom than you do. Ruslan, I think me and him are, I think we both really get into the weeds around the historicity of the Christian faith and arguments for religion and against religion and stuff like that. And he has very different conclusions than I do. But and because of that, he's gone down different rabbit holes than I have, and he can point me to things that I've never even considered. But I'd hope that I think it's shown that I also can do the same for him. And I think that's the beauty of people who do disagree, but also respect one another, that we're able to come to more humble conclusions. That's kind of my goal, is that I think Christians, if anything, if you're going to remain Christian, I believe that there's a bigger warrant for humility than is sort of perceived or expressed. So, uh, have you ever done or thought about ayahuasca? I hear many people have. I've thought about it. I've thought about it. I've definitely done shrooms. I've definitely done psilocybin. Not in like a huge like ego death type thing, but I've not quite ego death, but definitely more than microdosing. I think I need to go a little further than that though to feel anything. Jesus is coming back. Cool. Great, great, great contribution to the conversation, JT Money. Thank you so much for that new and undiscovered perspective and information. Thank you for that. This is a bit more personal, but my experience of deconversion increased my fear of death a lot more. Did a similar thing happen to you? Um, no. And maybe that's what allowed me to deconvert is that I began to slowly lose the fear of death. So I think if anything, I fear not doing enough in the little time that I have. I think I have a bigger fear of wasting life than experiencing death. Now, obviously, I don't want to experience like a painful death. I think that's scary. Like, what if I like, got in a car accident and it took me like 2 weeks to die, or someone stabbed me or shot. I don't know. Like, yeah, I don't like, I do fear like a very violent, very painful death. But death itself, aside from, again, the idea of not doing enough in this lifetime, that's the only real fear I really have around death. But death itself and some other thing after it, I can genuinely say I don't have a fear of that. I only have a fear of not doing some things in this lifetime. That's probably my biggest, not probably, yeah, it's probably my biggest fear that I have. So yeah, I think deconstruction also, I think a lot of fear around death as a religious person or a Christian is the fear of hell. I think that contributes to it. It's like, am I doing enough to get to heaven? And is my afterlife going to be one of misery? Um, but I don't really have any real opinions about the afterlife anymore. I don't really have much fear around the afterlife anymore either. So, um, yeah, I guess it just depends on how far you deconvert and your feelings around that. So, but I can empathize in some sense. I can see that fear of like the finality of life, you know. But maybe that's where it translates for me is that I do sense the finality of life in a much more crucial way, I think now. Like, man, life is really short. And if there is no afterlife, then you've got about, on average, if you're lucky, if all things go well, you've got about 70 to 80 years here and feels like a very long time in some sense, but in another sense, extremely short compared to what can be known about the world, about life, and what can be done in your opportunities. And not just life in general, but even just the seasons of life are even shorter. So you can say life in general is short, but your childhood is extremely short. College is extremely short. And you can only do certain things within that framework. You're not going back to college in the same sense that you could have at 18. And your first love is extremely short. Your first time experiencing your favorite sport or your favorite music or learning something or the time to learn something, to do something, do something with it in your life is shorter than life itself. So even if you compartmentalize life in smaller sections, you're like, man, that induces anxiety for sure. Am I familiar with Dan McClellan and his content work? I am familiar with Dan McClellan. I've watched a lot of his stuff. I think he's great. I will say I'm curious about his bias. I know that he seems very, very unbiased, considering that he's somewhat like a Dave Allison to me, in that he is very okay with tearing the Bible apart, and yet he's still a type of Christian. Some people would say he's not a real Christian. I think he's a Mormon. I think he's Mormon or Jehovah's Witness. I forget which one. He's one of those two. He's not part of mainstream Christian, evangelical Christianity for sure. And yet, he seems to be approach the Bible very rationally. Again, I don't know his even his rational biases around it, though. I'm curious. Like that's always a thing too, because people can come off extremely smart until you learn what they're thinking through and the behind and what their objective is. It doesn't seem like he has any clear objective, so it makes it nice to listen to him. And he does seem to grant, like he'll disagree with certain things, but also agree, like, oh yeah, no, the Bible does say this, blah 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 blah. And so I don't know, but he's interesting. I do catch some of his stuff. You talked about the need for flexibility within a particular faith so it does not break or hurt when something that makes you question that particular faith. Do you think some religions are flexible? Buddhism seems very flexible to the point that some people even say it's not actually a religion because you can be Buddhist and not believe in any supernatural um, entities, but you can also very much believe in supernatural entities. Some people have even deified the Buddha himself. Like, so, but it's to me, it seems like one of the most flexible. I don't know. Again, I don't know if full on flexibility is always the arbiter of truth, though. Again, go back to the muscle analogy, which I don't know if this really helps because I don't know if it can, transports one to one. But still, let's for conversation. Um, I, mm, the strength of it, the veracity of it, I think it may be just as important. Is it actually true? That's an important question. Like, are the things that Buddhism um, um, expresses, are those things actually true? And I've not dove deep into Buddhism. I've more than I did when I was a Christian, and I've read. I think even one of my favorite thinkers post Christianity is very much a Buddhist, but it's kind of Western. Alan Watts. He's man. One of my favorite books of 2022 was "The Wisdom of Insecurity," and it's very like fundamental, sort of basic Buddhism. But I think that Christianity can be flexible if you want it to, if you're willing to ask the tough questions and willing to come to unpopular opinions. I think it can be very strong and very flexible. I think in general, though, Christianity is flexible because if it wasn't flexible, we wouldn't have gotten all these different denominations. And it wouldn't have transported across so many different cultures. So in that sense, it is able to take on a lot of different skins, and in that sense, Christianity is extremely flexible. I think American Christianity, Western Christianity, very fundamental Christianity is not too flexible, and I'm not quite interested in that. Whew, a lot of questions. Okay, what do you believe is the purpose of life now that you're not a Christian? Is it any different from what you believed when you were a Christian? Obviously, it's very different than when I was a Christian. It's um, it's not to glorify God, right? That was always the purpose. It's like whatever you do is to glorify God. The chief end of man is to glorify God and enjoy Him forever. I think that was a old Westminster Confession of Faith, or that might even be the John Piper version of it. He added on and enjoy Him forever part. But yeah, I think now I think meaning is subjective and created by the individual, hence existentialism. So, okay, let's see. Are you in the LA area? Yes, I am. Have you ever had an existential crisis? If so, what have you done in order to help yourself make sense out of those things and get out of disassociation? Define existential crisis. I've definitely had, yeah, I think I have existential crisis often. I've had a lot of them. Uh, I've definitely disassociated as well. I used to get disassociation really bad in like 2022. Like I've always had moments So I don't know if you're, I don't the two. I don't. I guess you're correlating the two. I'm not sure how you're correlating them, but it correlates in my mind this way. I remember in 2020, you know, those moments like I've always had them as a kid. Every now and then you're looking in the mirror and you're looking at yourself and you're like, I'm a person. Like that's me, and and you start to feel like not the one experiencing your experience, but rather spectating your own experience. It's a weird feeling. It doesn't last very long. It's like lasts for like 5 or 10 seconds. You're like, that was weird. Like these are my hands, these are my eyes, and even the real subtle existential crisis of like uh um realizing that you've never seen your own face before. I guess isn't that don't you think that's kind of odd that you've only seen reflections of your face or images of your face, even if you've been in one of those like flipped mirror things where like it shows your face. That's also pretty cool too, because in the mirror we always see like the reverse of our face, not what everybody else sees, but then there's mirrors that actually flip it for you, and that's kind of cool. You can kind of do that with if you have a mirror in a medicine cabinet that has a mirror. I do that when I'm cutting my hair, and you can kind of see your right side is in fact on how it would look if you're looking at somebody's right side. Yeah. Anyways, but even then, you've never seen your own actual face. Like your eyes have not pointed at your face and seen your face. If you have a twin, you've seen someone who looks a lot like you, but you have not seen you. And that's trippy. So, yeah. But I've had those disassociative moments and I don't get them. It really came from, honestly, I started, um, I never really smoked. And came out to LA and was like, oh, why not? Let's try weed. And I just don't do it anymore. It's not my thing. Not to say that I'll never do it again, but I don't really have much interest in doing it. How I know I'm high is that I'm starting to disassociate, and then the problem came when I started having dissociative moments more, and I couldn't tell if I was high or not, which is weird. It's like, oh, you smoked yesterday, and now it's a whole new day, and you're still not sure if you're high or not. I did not like that feeling. I knew I wasn't high, but I'm saying like the disassociation was blurring, and I didn't like it at all. So a lot of people are asking questions that have a deep Christian undertone. I'm hopefully I uh, invite y'all to try to step outside of your own worldview a little more. Like for instance, do you believe everyone will be judged? I think that's a maybe that's not deeply Christian. Maybe that can be more broadly, but um, I don't know. Maybe there's a judgment at the end of I don't know. I don't. I'm agnostic. I genuinely don't have any strong opinions about what the afterlife should be. I think much of how we think about the afterlife could be true, but it could also very much be us projecting our own desires or fears into it. So there's that. I don't know. Sending love from Singapore, Southeast Asia. Yo, what up? Uh, would you ever consider posting your poem Shadow of a Doubt on your YouTube channel? If not, why? I've done a reaction video to it, but I have no intentions of posting the full thing. Um, because I don't want to be known for that. Um, Another reason why people think that I just dropped all my videos because I don't know, out of spite or I don't, but I was also still getting a lot of booking requests from Christians, from churches. And I think the more I leave that out there, though I see it as a benefit to some, if that's what you want to use for your worldview and for your walk, cool. But for me, it's affecting who's coming to what they're coming to me for. And I don't want to be known for that. I just don't, I don't want to keep, if I'm going to garner Christian fans, I want them to be understanding what they're walking into. And they're not following me because of Christian content or pro Christian content. So it's me trying to intentionally shape or reshape what type of audience I interact with and who requests me and what they expect of me. It just, I feel like it just simplifies things more so that, people are not in my comment section. If they see me like cussing or singing a song that doesn't sound very Christian or hanging out with people who don't seem very Christian, then I don't want to be constantly explaining to them. And they're like, well, then, because Christians, they will, even now, they still like kind of, they want to accuse me of being hypocritical. I'm like, well, I'm not hypocritical. I'm not a Christian anymore. So there's that. What do you mean? You're not a Christian? So there's still people who don't know I'm not a Christian. And so if I leave all that Christian content up, it's just going to keep the confusion going. So I think it makes things way less confusing. LA has a spirit on it. Okay. Uh, okay. Okay. What's your take on flexibility regarding personal convictions versus attributes on spiritual gifts? I have no opinions on attributes on spiritual gifts. I don't have any instructions or advice on that. Hey Joe, what do you think about Montell Fish's recent work? His album has been really great in my deconstruction journey. I haven't listened to his recent album, I don't think, but me and Montell still converse semi regularly. We were supposed to link up when he was in LA last time, but he was had a lot going on. But one day I've been I've encouraged him and sent him text messages, and I admire what he's doing. We all express that journey differently, so I don't have any strong opinions on how he's going about doing it, but I do appreciate that he's doing it, and I admire it, and I applaud him for what seems to be very honest wrestling. I hope that he's being honest with himself and honest with others, and I I wish more people, and I think we're seeing more of that. People give space for people to do that. I think the Christian for the artist, the Christian audience who has a Christian artist, they really want them to be the mascot and hero of faith in some sense. And we know that faith is much more gray. And I think that the more people like a Montell and others um, give space for honest reflection, because you can call people honest Christians as long as they're talking about sins that they've already gotten over, or sins that are not that bad, or small lack of faith. Like, man, I was doubt, but I came right back. I haven't listened, like, if Lecrae, and not to like not to shit on Lecrae. I've watched some of his stuff. I've heard some of his conversation around deconstruction. I don't know. I know Lecrae. I don't know. I don't know any personal details about his journey. I do believe, from what I've heard him put out, his deconstruction, at least the version that's out. Again, I don't know. I don't know anybody who knows personal details about his. Well, I probably do know people, but I don't. No one's told me, so don't hear me acting like I have some sort of insider knowledge. I don't. But from my perspective, I do believe his deconstruction that he's put out is pretty safe. You can tell that message in churches. Um, it may rub some people the wrong way, but ultimately, I think it's a pretty safe deconstruction, because he always ends up back. And if he was ever not at Jesus, we didn't really see that in real time. We kind of saw it after it's already been solved and addressed. So to hear artists who are sharing with you what they're going through in real time, I applaud it. I love it. I think it just feels honest. Not to say that Lecrae's not being honest. I'm just saying that even the examples that we do have of artists, quote unquote, deconstructing, and they're still able to exist among Christians, it can tend to be safe or retrospective. Like, it's already sort of been solved privately. Okay, what time is it? 101. All right, we've been at this for an hour and 15 minutes, and so okay, it's not bad. I want to go about an hour and a half, 2 hours, so we'll see. Would you ever go on Jubilee? I've never heard of Jubilee. Do people's testimony of the supernatural experience with Jesus carry weight in the sense of impacting your belief system? What? Whose personal testimony? Are you talking about people's personal testimony today or throughout history, or are you talking about like the personal testimony of those who? Um, I'm assuming you're saying today, people's personal testimony of supernatural experience with Jesus. No, I don't write off people's experiences uh, with the supernatural realm. Again, I think a lot of it is probably false or just visions or hallucinations, but I can't say for sure that all of it is that. I don't know. I do know that it is possible to have visions and hallucinations even as a sober, reasonable person. You can see dead people, dead family members, and stuff like that. You can see things that you. I know hallucinations or visions are real things, but that's not to say that they're all simply visions and hallucinations. And that's not to say that even the visions, or I love that Dale Allison, um, I thought it was, I never saw it that way. He was like, some people genuinely do just have visions and hallucinations, but that's not to say that those visions or hallucinations are not real themselves. Like they hallucinated something, they had a vision, something that nobody else can see or be verified, but it was something tangible in some sense, possibly. I don't know. Um, so because I cannot put myself in someone else's shoes specifically, there's not much I can, for now, I can do with that as far as my own personal belief, other than conceding that it is possible to have those experiences. But I don't know what to make of it. It's really subjective to me. It'd be something different if I had my own subjective experience that was, yeah. Would you say that you're more at peace and happier now as a non-Christian than you were as a Christian? I just think I'm just human, you know. I saw a comment the other day actually on an old interview I did, and someone was saying like, it's funny to see how people paint you and what perspective. So on one side, I've had a lot of people saying, "Man, Joe seems so much happier now that he's not a Christian." I'm looking at this video that he's done, and he seems so more alive. He seems so much more alive, so much more excited, happy, whatever. But then you have people who say the complete opposite. Oh man, if you just man, I'm watching old videos of him. It was a interview I did back in the top of 2020, and people were like, man, this interview versus what he's done recently, like you can tell he was happier, more positive in this one, and now now he's much more, he's not as happy. And I'm watching the interview, and I'm like, this feels like a mood I can have today. Maybe the interview he watched recently, I was tired, or I don't know, more contemplative. Like I just think humans are humans. If you just take little snapshots, then yeah, you can make a case that I was sadder. If you just pull up one video here, or even just project your own. I think a lot of people want me to be happier as a non-Christian, and there's a lot of people who want me to be sadder. That helps their case that I'm not making the right decision. Like, see, he's not as happy. I know you over there, you smiling on camera, but I can see the hurt in your eyes. Like, I can't convince you to unsee that. If you see that, you see it. I don't know, but I feel like I've had seasons of deep joy and happiness as a Christian, and seasons of deep depression, suicidal ideation as a Christian, and vice versa as a non-Christian. I've had deep seasons of joy and excitement and anticipation about life, and I've had seasons of depression and suicidal ideation. So, um, you know, I don't think that it just depends on which day you're talking to me, I guess, on which I just think I'm a I feel deeply. I think I always will. And I found ways to regulate that in very natural ways. And and be more aware. I'm more self-aware now. I know how to make those seasons not last too long. I also learned not to make too much of the highly emotional, joyful seasons either, and be able to appreciate them for what they are and not need that to be my everyday existence where I have to, because I'm just not a peppy, happy, go lucky person every day. And I know that, and that's okay. I don't need that every day to feel content and to feel um, um, excited about life or content about life. So, what is Joe doing now? How can we interact and consume your music and other creative arts? I just need to put out more stuff. Went through a very interesting season these past few months, and as you can see, I'm kind of slowly getting back out there and putting out more stuff. I don't want to be just a singer. I know that I was known as a sort of thinker of thoughts and speaker and stuff in the Christian world, and I want to still be involved in those type of conversations, which is why I started this channel. I don't want to be seen just. I know that I'm more than just a singer, and a lot of my older fans know that too. Like, oh yeah, he's a podcaster, he's a speaker. Like, we like to hear him think, not just sing. So yeah, just trying to do more of that. Getting out of my own head about releasing new music. I've got a ton of new music that I just need to go ahead and let out. Because I'll be writing all the dang time and just overthinking it. So it's just a matter of putting it out. So yeah, just keep following. I really appreciate people who've been rocking with me for a minute. Um, do you still do spoken word? No, not really. Someone said, like the growing number of Muslims who have had dreams of Jesus and converted to Christianity. Um, sure, I don't know the statistics on that, but again, it doesn't really. I think Christians believe that the simplest answer is the best answer, and even then, they oversimplify the simplest. So what I mean by that is they think that even around the resurrection, they think that the simplest answer for the resurrection is or the start of Christianity is the resurrection, and um, they think that the more complicated the explanation, then the less true it is, or at least the more complicated it is for them to wrap their mind around in their own supernatural worldview. And I don't think that the simplest answer. I mean, for instance, like going back to epilepsy, the simplest answer for epilepsy at one point was must be a demon. I don't need to know what's happening in the brain or whatever. Just, demons exist. This person's tripping against their own will. Must be a demon. Now, the answer is much more complicated of how that happens, but it still has explanatory power. Same thing for evolutions, XYZ. So people having visions, it's not to say that they can't have those visions, but I don't think that just because they have those visions that the explanation for them is all that simple. What I've also learned and what's kept me agnostic and just away from Christianity in general is that a lot of times, and Christians need to do a better job of doing due diligence, because a lot of times people will present this story that something happened, and and you get excited about it, you go snooping around a little more, and you try to find corroborating stories and and really get the details of it. You start to realize it's not as reliable of a story or unbiased of a story as you presumed. And I always found myself being greatly disappointed by that journey. Every time somebody posts a story, oh look, they just proved that this thing happened in the Old Testament, and it was true. I remember I did a video. I pressed Ruslan about it. This archaeologist found that Sodom and Gomorrah really happened, and they found sulfur remains and XYZ, and he does a video and saying like, wow, look, this really happened, and he posted the article link and all that. So I'm not gonna lie, I was a little intrigued. I was like, dang, this could be crazy. I went down the rabbit hole And by the way, this plant looks so fake in this shot right here, but it's so real. It looks good. Come on, bird of paradise. That is a good looking bird. But I went down the rabbit hole and I was like, well, bro, here are the problems with this story. Like the way that it was presented, the archaeologist that was presented, it made it seem like he was like this big shot in the archaeologist world. He wasn't. He didn't even go to an accredited university. Um, and even other Christian scholars were saying, well, even if this site is true, where it's been dated is actually a couple hundred years off from the biblical account of when Sodom and Gomorrah happened, and there'd be a lot of adjustments you have to make to the biblical account to make this work. And so, um, and to Ruslan's credit, if he's watching this, he was like, I have to go look into that. You know, it's good points. We'll check into that. And it's not to say that he doesn't have any standing for believing in archaeological evidence for events in the Bible. I think a lot of those things really happened. But I just think that, I guess my point to him was like, man, I feel like sometimes Christians present these headliner stories as like um, home runs for things that happen in the Bible. And then if you go just doing any sort of cursory reading and snooping around, it oftentimes doesn't really hold up a lot of water. And that was always deeply disappointing to me. Um, so now I'm just really skeptical. Anytime somebody says, "Oh, now we got proof," and I'm like, "All right, show me. Let's go down the rabbit hole together. Show me." And oftentimes it doesn't turn up all that convincing, even when I hope that it would be convincing. So that's why I'm in the position I am now. I'm like cautious and skeptical now. Um, Ooh, a lot of questions. Okay, y'all asking some heavy questions. My brain is working today. I'm glad I had my coffee and protein. In your deconstructing process, how did you reconcile with any experiences? I love these questions, by the way. So I did say bring on the heavy questions, and y'all brought them. So I'm not faulting y'all. Y'all are doing what I asked y'all to do. Um, I also appreciate the curiosity. I was actually hoping that some of the people who were had some animosity towards me would show up in the live chat, so I can, because people were saying you need to interact in real time. Somebody can challenge you in real time. Maybe I'll just continue to do things, and maybe maybe they couldn't make it today, so maybe they'll pop up on some other ones. Um, but I'm open to pushback because I don't have a agenda to push. I'm just telling you where my stance is and where a lot of my disappointments have lied. So, in your deconstructing process, how do you reconcile with any experiences you've had? For example, prophetic experiences where someone said something to you that only a higher power could know. Um, I think those experiences is why I've not closed off the idea to the supernatural. But at the same time, I do know I have to reconcile that with the knowledge that sometimes things seem unexplainable, and maybe there was a few details that you were missing, and if those were added in, you'd be like, "Oh, that actually was quite ordinary. Um, I just made it to be extraordinary." So that's where the skepticism come in. But there have been a couple of times in my life where I'm like, even now to this day, I'm like, I don't know how she knew that. And I've had my fair share of run-ins with prophets because I've had a lot, especially as you get more popular and start going to different churches and stuff, and people of everybody, people prophesy to me all the time, and I'm like, y'all niggas be lying. Why y'all be lying, bro? Why y'all do this, man? I remember I got called on stage in Phoenix, man, at this conference. They brought this prophetess in, and everybody's just so amazed by her. And I didn't want no dealings with her, man. I just stayed away. And it was like I said, it was a weekend long conference, and so I did my parts. I did my spoken word and singing and stuff. And when it was her sort of headline time to go and speak and do her prophet thing, I went back. It was on a campground, so I went back to my sort of really nice dorm house on site and just minding my business, man. And somebody came and got me like, yo, or they called me. They were like, hey, man, the prophetess is looking for you. She's on stage right now. I was like, please, no, don't do this to me. I don't want to do this because I don't know how to fake a face. That is a weakness of mine. I don't know how I've gotten better, but it is really hard in those type of situations for me to fake a face. And she was like calling me on stage, and it was like 400 people there. One, she didn't even know my name. And then I'm not going to go into detail what she prophesied, but the whole time I'm thinking like, this is so basic. Like if you have just went on my YouTube channel for literally 5 minutes, you know this stuff. This is, and everyone's just like, oh, wow. And I was staring at her with the straightest face. I wasn't frowning, but I wasn't smiling either. I was just deadpan because I was like, nothing she was saying was on point. And then people after were like, man, yo, what do you think about the prophecy? What do you think? And I was like, cool, I guess. Um, so I just think that in my experience, there's been a lot of very easily explained things, but there's some things I haven't really been able to explain. And I just put that in the category of I don't know what to do with that. I think there's possibly an infinite amount of steps to get from those experiences to God is real, Jesus rose from the grave, he's coming back. There's a lot of stuff in between because just being open to the idea of supernaturalism doesn't get you to Jesus getting out of the grave. It it just opens up the possibility of it. So, whew, okay, I'm getting hungry. So let's see how long I can do this. Um, will you podcast again or just doing this kind of stuff for now? I want to put all these on podcasts, and I need to podcast more. I'm going to podcast more. I know I need to. Maybe it'll be just these type of things where I just have these conversations or monologues because I think I've just spent so much time, man. I really like a lot of those podcast episodes I did were scripted out. I had manuscripts for them. Took me months to think through those things, not to necessarily write them, but just to think and to I felt like they were really well thought out and creative. And maybe I just need to get back into that. But I enjoyed them too. So thoughts on morals or ethics or any moral code you live by or think of highly currently? I think the saying of Jesus, do unto others as you would want them to do unto you. I think that's a very powerful ethic, even a very powerful politic. And I don't think you need Jesus or religion to come to that conclusion. One of my most favorite recent books, The Bonobo and the Atheist, which I think anybody should read, even Christians who want to make a strong argument that doesn't straw man. Because again, I'm not an atheist, but if you don't want to straw man and you want to actually read from people who make cases for morality outside of a Christian world or religious theistic worldview, because I think a lot of times people straw man or just don't, they just, I think this is a phenomenal book. This In Search of Humanism Among Primates, phenomenal book. It's ironic that I've watched some of his videos, and then when I finished this book, I was actually reading this book on the day he died. I didn't even realize he died until like a month after it. Somebody was like, "Oh yeah, he just passed away." I was like, "Bro!" And I looked at the date that he passed away, and I was like, "Yo, I was reading his book the day he passed away." And his case is kind of against, obviously against a theistic worldview, but also against someone like Sam Harris, who says we can get to morality, objective morality through rationality. Both of these perspectives say that there's a top down, that God up top gives morality down below, or rationality exists above human existence and gives us morality. He's making the argument that no, morality, empathy is more of a bottom up. It is not. It is not just utilitarian in the sense that, oh, I'll just do these things to get what I want. I'm only kind because I do what I. But but we actually have a natural proclivity to be empathetic. It's just that morality, on much smaller scales, as evolution is concerned, is much more easily mediated at in small groups when you scale that thing, it becomes way more gray, way more gray and way more complicated. And I think that we see that complication in the new world, and we're like, oh, there's no way we can do this without a God. That this couldn't have this could only happen with God. My perspective is, think of it like a basketball game. The rules around basketball have evolved, but for the most part, they're over the last. There's a lot of tweaks here and there within the NBA, but your basic idea of basketball is quite simple. Even in an organized space, you have a coach, you've got 5 players on the court, you got 2 basketball rims, you got out of bounds. Even if you don't have a 3-point line, you still have out of bounds. You can do this many dribbles. There's even a way to play within those rules. You know, you can run certain plays, pick and roll. There's defensive strategies, all that quite easily mediated at that scale of 5-on-5. Imagine if you now try to play basketball 50 versus 50 with all the same rules, all the same strategies. It's not as simple anymore. You may need a bigger court. What if you can't get a bigger court? What is a point guard? How do you run plays? How do you strategize for that? You only have 2 basketball goals. Do you need more basketballs now? It becomes a lot more gray. And the analogy I'm trying to make is that bonobos, they only really exist because they don't have language like we do. And the early humans didn't either, Neanderthals. We don't get language until the Homo sapiens, at least subtle language, I should say, very subtle, where we can now articulate things outside of ooh, ah. Because even bonobos have language, chimps have language. They can say like, hey, yo, there's a snake up in the tree, or there's a snake down below. They can communicate those things understandably within themselves. Now, when you try to start saying more complicated things like, well, there's not just a snake in the tree. There was actually, I was by the river today and there was a snake by the river. Be careful when you go out there. That's a bit more complicated and you need a lot more language skills than just ooh, right? So we develop more language, and with language, we also develop the ability to create fiction, to create stories, myths and fictions. Dualistic realities come on the scene about 30 to 70,000 years ago. Another great book that kind of goes through that as well is Sapiens by Yuval Noah Harari. I just finished this, I guess about a month and a half ago as well. And that in tandem with that book was actually really good. And you start to get this picture of how morality works pretty effectively on smaller scales. Once it goes beyond that, you need fiction to keep people on the same page, otherwise, without fiction and more supple language, chimps and bonobos and even early Neanderthals could only exist in groups of a dozen or a couple of dozen. Beyond that, it's really hard to manage and mediate that. But if you have language and you have fiction to tie large groups together, he was saying in the book, Neanderthals compared 1-to-1 versus a Homo sapien, Neanderthals win every day. They were bigger. Their brains were even bigger. They were stronger. If there were to be a 5-on-5 fight between Neanderthals and Homo sapiens, the Neanderthals would win. But because Homo sapiens have this, what they call the cognitive revolution, where they're able to come up with fiction and stories and stuff, they're now moving in much larger groups than just a couple of dozen. They're moving in groups of a couple hundred. Neanderthals could not do that. So one way that Homo sapiens very easily and likely took over Neanderthals through war and possibly through sex as well, because Neanderthal DNA is still in our gene pool today. I believe it's people who come from Asia still have Neanderthal. Asia and Europe, I believe, still have Neanderthal, very, very small percent of Neanderthal DNA in their blood today. So, they're able to move in much bigger groups. My point being that morality and empathy and group cooperation is much more easily managed when you have fiction and stories that evolve with that. Um, but the larger our world gets, it becomes much more difficult to say what is objectively wrong or right, because we're acting as a global society now versus when morality was first on the scene. You only really had to worry about what the morality was for your group, your small group. And anybody who wasn't your group was the enemy anyway. So we didn't have to worry about their morality. Their morality was wrong. They were on the wrong side of who's God or whatever. But now that we're trying to exist as a global community, this question of, how do we get morality without God, um, becomes a really big issue, especially, post Holocaust. So I get the gray, but just because there's gray doesn't mean that it's not true. And just because theistic worldview is convenient to tie up the loose ends to some degree, though I think even that has a lot of problems that I won't get into today. Um, but just because it's useful and convenient doesn't necessitate that it's true. So, ooh, that was a lot. Okay, Jeremiah 29:13. I'm not looking it up, so you have to just. I don't know what you're saying. I don't speak in code. Did you grow up Christian? Yes, I grew up Christian. Does it not intrigue you that there are witches and other spiritual practices? What do you mean intrigue? I don't think that. Yeah, I don't think that. I don't know. I don't know what. I don't know. I'm not exactly sure what you're asking. It doesn't do much to me. I think people are going to find their spiritual practices. Christianity is not the only spiritual practice, so I don't. Yeah, it doesn't really. I don't know. Um, do I know much about Seventh Day Adventists? I know a bit. I know a good bit. uh, yeah, I just watched the video of Eric Mason basically saying that they're a bunch of cult followers, which I thought was interesting. But yeah. But then that begs the question, where do chimps and bonobos get their sense of morality? They evolved that way. I think empathy is a very strong evolutionary resource, um, that we would look out for one another. We would care for one another. Bonobos, ooh, I'm getting hungry, so it's hard for me to focus now. So if I start feeling a little tangent, start going on a tangent or whatever, please blame my stomach. I might go grab something to snack on real quick. Um, but even in this book, um, bonobos, the more complex primates are, the more they have the ability, or should I say animals even, more they have the ability to have empathy. So, which is why there are certain animals that we domesticate and other ones we don't. Dogs have a level of empathy, which is outside of the primate. They have some of the highest level of empathy among animals. And so, which is why they become man's best friend. Cats, somewhat, not as much. So that's why they're a little more controversial. Um, there are a lot of species, and there's a gradient. There's not just like it's not just these are this way and this. And there's a gradient of empathy across the animal kingdom, and empathy is a very powerful um, resource, I guess you can say, for a species to want to look out for one another, to move in tribes and camps and stuff. I mean, again, Homo sapiens, um, if they, on a one-to-one scale, they don't survive in the wilderness. Like our biggest feature, our strongest feature is the fact, or at least one of them, I should say, is the fact that we move in groups, that we hunted in groups. Is that for the most part, if you put us up one to one with a lot of animals in animal kingdom, we lose. Hyena, lion, even certain insects, uh, elephant, other chimps, bonobo, like whoever, like we lose a lot. But our strongest feature is that we cooperate. We've been able to make myths. We've been able to make uh, sports out of sheer cooperation. Um, so. yeah, I think there's a strong evolutionary benefit for empathy among species. Um, and again, it's a gradient. I think one thing I found interesting about the bonobos, I think, which by the way, if you're not familiar, bonobos are our closest living relative. It's not to say that we came from, a lot of people have a misconception about evolution as if it's linear. We did not come from bonobos. We have a common ancestor. We did not come from chimps. We have a common ancestor. We did not come from gorillas. We have a common ancestor. Okay, so does that make sense? So that's like saying I have a fourth cousin who's existing today. Was I born from my fourth cousin? No. Do we have the same parents? No. Do we even have the same grandparents? Probably not. But at some point, we do connect. That's the point. And so bonobos are the most recent or our closest living relatives. And I find it interesting that their inclination is very different than chimpanzees when it comes to conflict. Chimpanzees are empathetic within their own group, but if they run into another group of chimpanzees, they will fight it out. Bonobos are very different. Bonobos are only violent to animals that are a threat to them or they're trying to kill for food or whatever. But they're not they're not violent towards each other. At least that's not their proclivity. There is no, if I remember correctly, there are no documented uh, uh, documented events of bonobos being violent towards one another, except for just I'll bring it up in a second. There's only one instance where bonobos are violent towards each other, and it's quite interesting what that instance is. But bonobos actually rather, if they run into another group of bonobos, it may seem very tense at first. They actually prefer to not fight. They'd rather have sex. It turns into a big orgy. And that's how they solve their differences and they become cool with one another. There is this natural inclination in them to be peacemakers. The only time that we know that they've been violent to each other is when a bonobo puts an infant bonobo life in danger. They strongly value child life, and so do we. So I think it's kind of interesting. Okay, I gotta cut this down very soon, maybe in 10 minutes, 'cause I'm getting hungry and I can't think as clearly, and so my points might start falling apart. Uh, can you appreciate some of your older subscribers may feel a sense of shock at your deconversion, especially for those who regard you as a source of inspiration, encouragement in their faith? Hearing you speak so nonchalantly about what you believe can be hard, regardless. I appreciate you a lot, brother. One, I think I've a lot have appreciated about. I still do. I don't speak negatively about them. I speak negatively about people who come at me negatively. Yes, absolutely. And even then, I give a lot of grace. But for people who still rock with me and still want to know about me and are concerned about me and my well-being, like I, yeah. And to say that I speak nonchalantly, well, it's been almost 3 years, man, since I made it publicly announced. Really, it's been over 3 years since I actually made that decision privately within myself. So you'll have to also appreciate the fact that it is a matter of fact to me these days. It's not something that I'm quite emotional about very regularly, if at all, anymore. You're acting as if I just made this decision yesterday. Had this been, 3 years ago, and maybe, but now this is my life. I've been living this life. It may be still of a shock to you because you don't live this life with me every day, but yeah, this is where I'm at. So I don't feel like I have to step on. I'm not going to continue to walk on eggshells. This is where I'm at. So, and I speak matter of fact. I don't try to speak condescendingly. I don't try to speak. in a way that belittles people's faith, but that's your faith, and it is what it is. So, is a child's faith just as valid as an adult's, despite their ignorance and naivete? I don't know. You have to ask Jesus on that one. I don't know. Um, I think faith takes, as you learn more about the world, it is easier to have faith when you don't know very much. It starts getting a little more difficult and a little more tricky as you get older. So yeah, it is easier for a child to unflinchingly believe a lot of things that a parent would tell them, not even just around faith, but about racism, about homophobia, around science, vaccines, whatever. Like children are just much more easily to convince about certain things because their parents believe them. So, what are your top three main rational reasons that change your mind about scriptures? Um, 2 seconds. Okay, I had to grab me a little snack. I don't. People always ask, what's your number one or number three or whatever. I don't really have a. Just ask me what I think about the scriptures. I don't think that there's a number one or whatever. I think the issue is that people think that if I give one or two, like, oh, see, that's not even a good argument. I think that it is them the what is how's the phrase go? The the total is greater than the sum of its parts or something like that. Meaning I think there are a ton of rational, like, too many to list. You just have to ask me. I think sometimes when you try to single one, they're like, oh, see, that's why there's an easy explanation for that. That leads to another thing. Collectively, then it becomes an issue. That's like even if something as small as an ant. Like, yo, yeah, if you put an ant on my skin, I think I'll be okay. But if you put 3,000 of them on me, I might have an issue. I might have a real issue. And I think it's just the collective um, experience of trying to rationalize scripture. And that's also to say, I don't think you have to believe in the inerrancy of scripture to be a Christian. I know a lot of Christians who don't believe the Bible is inerrant. I don't think that you should. I think it feels very flat earthy to believe, to me, my personal opinion, to if you've really wrestled with opposing thoughts surrounding the history of how the Bible was put together, it becomes extremely difficult then to make a rational case that it was never edited or that it never evolved or that it didn't borrow from other religions. Not to say that it made it up altogether, but it was strongly influenced by other worldviews. It'd be very difficult to even prove authorship. You just run into a lot of issues that you have to you're plugging up a lot of holes. And yet, I don't write off the idea that you could still believe that the God that is testified about in the Bible exists and he has something to say to humanity. And he even says a lot of it through the Bible. You just have to do some work to spit out the bones. So that's my perspective on the scriptures. Okay. Do you believe humans are the only species that are conscious of seeking or finding a higher power? As far as I know, as far as I've researched, I don't know of any other animals that show any signs of religious thought. However, there are primates who show, particularly bonobos, um, and possibly chimps, if I'm not mistaken, don't quote me, that show precursors of religious or superstitious thought. We've even, I remember reading that book, and it was talking about how they have caught two bonobos sort of doing like a repetitive stomp in trying to get it and trying to make rain come. So that is this superstition that if I do something, then I can sort of manipulate the weather, or that there's precursors to religious thought there. Um, just even just real basic stuff like um, certain animals who like bonobos, like if they're how did it work? Like if you give if they if you randomly give them food, there's no real rhyme or reason to the intervals of how they'll get food through this little slot or whatever. And if they do something on their own end that they think made it happen, so for instance, they say they scratched their face and food came in the tray, they'll pick up their own superstitions that, well, if I scratch my face, then food will come. Even though there's no real, and it can go 10, 15 times in a row of them not getting food, but they'll still do it. And then I forget the specific example. I'm just using my face as an scratch my face as an example. But we do see that in other primates that they'll do things that they believe if I just, well, oh, that's what connects. They're trying to connect the dots. And it's very early sort of, I guess, scientific hypothesis, I think you can say, or even religion. It's like, oh, if we do this dance, rain will come. If we do this, and we see precursors of that in other animals, but not full blown belief in a higher power that I know of. So yeah, bro, finally got some food. Yeah. Let me tell you something. You go to Kroger's, and I'm not all big on store bought cake, but man, that yellow pudding cake from Kroger's, something serious, man. It is it is the truth. Primates ain't the only ones that can be thoughtful with a moral sense and capable to communicate. Absolutely. Yeah, dogs, great example. Other dogs, other animals, communication, you don't need subtle, supple language to communicate. Many other animals communicate for sure. Okay. Uh, I think I think I've answered most of the questions here. Um, mm, see. Okay, great. I think we're good. Well, do you consider your faith to be deep but rigid? No. I don't think I have faith right. I wouldn't describe it as faith. I think I just have an interest in it. So if the female bonobos are cool, then the entire group will be cool. No, 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 no. It's not just the females. It is the sex between bonobos in a conflict mediation is mostly male to female, but females will have sex with other females, and even more rarely, males will have sex with other males, but it's the most common is male and female and then female male. I'm sorry, male and female and then female with female. Has anyone asked about the Shroud of Turin? Yeah, I've read about that. It's partly true, partly a hoax. Is that a specific character on your shirt? No, it's just I was at the Black Market Flea in LA, and it's just like a local artist, local clothing designer guy that I'm black dude that I bought a shirt from. Uh, Let me say this. I was using, this is, I should have said this earlier as an example of like, you need faith or a strong bias to believe. And any rational argument is not an open and shut case. It really just boils down to preference and some fact checking that you can prove or disprove. And I see parallels to that with the Kendrick and Drake beef. So you could tell who were the fans of who early on of this beef. People were like, oh, Drake's going to get smoked. Drake's going to, before Kendrick even put a verse out, or at least after like that, you could tell. And I'm a fan of both. You can consider me agnostic on the case. I'm a fan of both, and I love them for different things. Drake, um, Drake surprised me when he dropped push-ups. I'm like, okay, this is actually he's going to hold his own, you know? And then, he drops the AI thing. Okay, interesting move. Kendrick comes out with 616 or 616 and Euphoria. You can't read it without an encyclopedia and genius.com pulled up beside you. I didn't really fool with it heavy at first, but listen to it again. I was like, oh, this is actually a pretty good diss. I think it's evenly matched. Then Drake comes out with Family Matters. Now, the only thing that really killed it, which I still don't think it was, and there's no rules in this, there's nothing fair or unfair, but I still feel like the gentleman thing to do for Kendrick was to let people sit with that disc, because I think that helped him out a lot more than that track itself. He dropped, Drake drops Family Matters, and then Kendrick drops Meet the Grams less than an hour later, and it kind of pulls lets the air out of the balloon for Drake, and people didn't really sit with what Drake was saying. It didn't matter with what Kendrick was saying if it was true or not. At that point, it was like, oh, he had something in the tank, and he's killing him. But even still, for me, if you're just listening to what they're saying and how they're rapping, and whether it really came down to preference. I said this, I tweeted this to Kevin on stage today. It really boiled down to strong preference and whether or not those facts are actually true. Right? Did this thing do the thumbs up? Is YouTube doing that? I'm so confused right now. How's my camera? I thought that was just for the iPhone. I'm on my actual camera right now. What is doing that? I don't know what program. I have a teleprompter thing that does its own thing, but I'm running this through OBS, and then OBS is going to, I don't know which program is doing that, but I thought that only happens on FaceTime with the iPhone, but I'm literally on my Sony camera. Maybe YouTube does that? I don't know. I thought that was weird. Anyways, if you ignore the fact that Kendrick dropped right after Drake and just let those records match up to each other, bar for bar, fact for fact, vibe for vibe, I felt like it could go either way. Some moments I could feel like Drake won it. Other moments I felt like Kendrick could win it. There was no real smoking gun until "Not Like Us" dropped. When not, which, by the way, guess who sent me "Not Like Us"? Guess who the first person who sent that to me was? Can I put? It was Ruslan. Me and Ruslan was talking about the beef. He was like, "Yo, I think Kendrick dropped again." So I'm actually at a outlet. I was at a mall outlet out here in LA looking for some Pumas, and I had my AirPods in. I'm listening. I turn on "Not Like Us," and when he sent it to me at first, I was like, "Oh my gosh, I don't want to listen to this." Oh, actually, no. Ruslan didn't send me that one. Ruslan sent me I think the other one. It was my group chat that sent the "Not Like Us." And I immediately said, "Oh my gosh, Kendrick dropped again. I don't feel like reading again." Because I felt like every track that he dropped, I had to like be at a computer with the African Americans history book next to me. I feel like I just had to read. I'm like, can somebody just drop like a? That's one thing I did like about Drake. It was like, man, we in a battle, man. Drop the petty stuff. Like Kendrick was just so poetic, and I love that kind of stuff. But in a battle, I'm just like, bro, I just want to listen to it. It took so much. It was so heady. That's why people were writing think pieces about it to this day, just breaking it down, doing exegesis on it like it's a New Testament gospel. When he dropped "Not Like Us," though, I said, I'm listening to it, and I was like, oh no, oh no, this is bad. This is bad. Kendrick dropped a club banger. I was like, I think this is a club banger. Oh no. And I'm in LA, so I was like, oh no, LA finna turn up today. It was on a Saturday, I think it was. I said, LA finna turn up. This is crazy. Drake better. And at that point, I didn't call it fully because I was like, maybe, hopefully, this is Drake's territory. Making bangers, like, that's his territory. Like, all the conscious rap stuff, that's Kendrick. And Drake was really trying to keep his head above water with that. It was, he made some. In hindsight, even that whole like you rapping like you trying to free the slaves. There's a lot of missteps on Drake's behalf, but it still wasn't a clear victory. Kendrick dropped the "Not Like Us," and I'm like, okay, it's the beef is not settled, but Drake has to drop a banger immediately, like tonight, at the latest tomorrow morning, because this track cannot be out very long without something else that's like that people can play in the club. And because up at this point nobody had any real songs except for Push-Ups maybe, but for the most part none of these songs had like a hook, repeatable phrases that audiences can just on the first listen you hear it. Every other song between Push-Ups, the AI joint, Meet the Grams, Family Matters, all of that, you kind of had to like listen to it a bunch of times and read along, but you couldn't just hear it one time and remember lines from it. You just like, oh, I think he said something like XYZ. Not Like Us, it's like, oh, it's easy. There's a bunch of quotables in there. A minor, OV ho, freaky ass nigga, he's a fan. Like there's so many repeatable stuff. I'm like, Drake needs to drop something that has repeatable lines that disparage Kendrick. Gossip won't do it at this point. Rapping your behind off won't do it at this point. Having bars won't do it. It just got to be like back to back. That was easy. Going bad. Is that a world tour or your girls tour? Like, he ain't had that. So I'm like, man, as long as Drake drops within the 24 hours, preferably the next 12 hours, because this can't stay out very long. When he didn't respond, I was like, this is done. This is done. So it was a clear win, especially because, rap battles are won by the crowd. There's just no like scorecard or whatever. It's just like, the audience decides. And when you got the audience on your side at that point, it doesn't matter if what he was saying is true. It's like being at a high school table, a roast session or whatever, and somebody roasting you. If you can say a whole bunch of true stuff about them, and it's not necessarily funny, it's just disparaging and like, man, wow, that's really hard. But if somebody says something about you that's funny and clever, it don't matter if it's true. Everyone's laughing at you. And you can be saying, no, wait a minute, I do got nipples. But it's like, no, he said you ain't got no nipples. No, you ain't got no nipples. No, I do. Everybody has nipples, y'all. It's clearly, I can show you if you want. Everybody has nipples. It's a normal thing. Trust me, I have nipples. If you need proof, it doesn't matter. Rationality is out the door here. It only matters if it's catchy and it's funny. And people can go repeat it later, man. Yo, you heard what he said about, man, he said he ain't had no nipples. And now everybody across the school is saying that you ain't got no nipples. Even if it's not true, it doesn't matter. Y'all know how this goes in high school. You had rumors spread about you. And that's what happened here. It didn't matter if Drake had a kid. It doesn't even matter if Drake is actually a pedophile. And I'm not convinced that he is. I'll just say that. I think that he has made he has done very, very questionable things. A lot has been brought to light. He has made a lot of questionable decisions around girls who are younger than him. I don't think there's any real proof that he's done anything illegal. Now, if that came about, then that is, if this turned to a legal thing, then yeah, he's done like Kelly and Diddy, man. But I'm not going to add into. I think it's just what he's done is extremely questionable. It's not illegal that I know of. He's not done it. I won't get to now. We're just getting to details, and so I don't know. None of that's been proven. But it's enough to make a diss track about it and it stick. Now, I'll say that. I'll reserve judgment on whether or not he's actually done something illegal, but it's enough for people to hear Not Like Us and be like, yeah, dog. Yeah. So anyways, prior to Not Like Us, it's kind of how I feel about faith. Anyone can make arguments for Kendrick or for Drake. You can make arguments for or against faith, and I think you can make some pretty strong cases for either one. It really boils down to worldview, perspective, and preferences, and even a little bit of fact checking. But depending on the day, depending on the audience who you're talking to, it can go either way. Now, when God drops a Not Like Us track where it's undeniable, I just haven't seen the Not Like Us track I just haven't seen it. I ain't seen that track. But once that track drops, it's like, hey, man, he won, bro. Kendrick won. There's no denying that. So that's my perspective. This cake is so good. So good. Should I start a Twitch, by the way? I feel like Twitch would be easier than YouTube. I don't like the way. I feel like Twitch might have a better UI than YouTube when it comes to streaming, for real. What's the cake with? I'm not drinking anything with it. It's just straight up pudding cake. No wonder people don't like Jesus. He said God loves God's enemies. So love your enemies. Okay. Okay. There's video proof of Drake talking to young women in ways only her dad should. Maybe, 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 because even in some way, I'm not talking to my daughter that like that. Again, I yeah, I haven't seen that particular video, but I've seen. I'm like, yo, this is he's done stuff that's like highly questionable, illegal. No, I don't know if there's any proof that he's actually done anything illegal. That's one thing, but he's done. There's a lot of stuff out there that's like, man, this is sketch, man. This is quite sketch. And I think it sucks that he brought up some serious allegations against Kendrick, and no one took him seriously, with no real reason why they didn't, other than, well, we know Drake's a liar and he's a pedophile himself, so therefore he's lying. I'm like, well, yeah, that doesn't mean that he's not telling. I don't know. I don't know. There's no proof. That's what I'm saying. It comes down to fact checking. There's no proof that Kendrick didn't. In the same way, there's no proof that Drake did do that. He's just done some weird. He's done some. It's questionable, extremely, extremely questionable things that I would not ever do or justify within dudes that I hang out with. Let me just put that out there, okay? Because you won't hear me going on record as an apologist for Drake. Uh, so yeah, but a lot of these videos and these things about Drake, the reason why I know they're questionable and not illegal is because a lot of this stuff has been out there and people are just now decided to be outraged about it. It's not new information about Drake. It goes up and it dies down. He puts out a song. He's just a hit maker, but that calls into question our own sense of judgment as a society, because we've went through that before. We knew about the allegations of Bill Cosby, and it was rumored around, and people, he's funny, can't prove it. We went through that with Kelly. There was been rumors, and even a whole we knew the whole Dave Chappelle skit about it. We knew that, and it was as if it didn't happen, and and we just kept listening to his music again, and it came back all around one more time. So yeah, you ever thought about doing gaming streams? I don't game, so nah, I would just be on there talking. Okay, what do you think about Lil Nas? Yo, let me tell you what I think about Lil Nas. So recently, I've been working with his audio engineer. He's been doing the songs I'm about to be releasing. Some of them he's uh, engineered for me. The guy who, yeah, he engineers for the Lil Nas's producers. What's their Day Trip? They do everything since Panini. They've pretty much done, and they live out here in LA, like 15 minutes from my house actually, and somehow got connected with this guy, and I've been recording at the same place that Lil Nas has been recording. And the producers, I ran into them one time. Really, 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 really nice guys. The producer, the engineer that I've been working with is really dope. Really, really good. Um, and he's kind of telling me about not. Let me say something about what I've learned about Lil Nas through this guy. And I don't think I'm sharing anything sensitive, but that dude works. And I was convicted because Lil Nas, he showed me the folder of all the unreleased songs that Lil Nas has made in the past couple of years. Do y'all know that this man, Lil Nas X, is sitting on like 1,200 songs? This man writes a few hundred songs a year. It's crazy. And the engineer was like, yeah, he just hits me up anytime, pretty much on call. Like he can call me at 3 o'clock in the morning, 11 p.m. It doesn't matter. Like he's in the studio. He'll do a session with me. He said, I remember one time I did a session with him late night. And the next day I ran into this other engineer and he was like, yeah, I was with Lil Nas X last night. He was like, there's no way you could have been with Lil Nas last night. I was with him last night. We were working together. He's like, nah, I was with him last night. And he was like, what time? And he come to find out, I was like, he just did this like long session and then left and went to another late night session. That dude be writing, maybe almost to a fault, because now he has like, I mean, how do you whittle down 1,200 songs into an album? Even if it's a deluxe album, that's a lot of songs to not have released. So I don't know, but that dude be grinding. Mm, are you still friends with the opposing guys? Yep. I mean, Ezekiel still be chopping it up. I did a podcast with Ezekiel, and then the footage got damaged. Apparently, I did a podcast episode with him, so he's releasing a bunch of podcast episodes right now. And I'm like, "Yo, when mine coming out?" He was like, "Yeah, bro, got damaged." It was a good interview too, man. I think we shot them back in like December. I think it was. It was definitely last year. I think it was December because I was going to a Christmas party after it. So yeah, it was in December, and that interview is gone. It's gone. All right. I think I'm about to wrap it up. Been here for a minute. I think I've answered a lot of questions, and thank y'all for asking a bunch of them. And it's been real. This will stream. I guess you can replay this. And next time, I will have the audio situation figured out. I just got this. I've had it for a minute, and just my first time using it, and it's great. This Elgato prompter, and I literally just set it up today, and so I'm hoping I'll figure out how to use it even better next time around. But that's how I'm able to look at the camera and read your chat, so I can see myself on the right side, and I can see the chat on the left side, and I don't have to like look away to answer questions, and I can still be in front of my like actual camera and just look dead into the camera. So that's really, really cool. And I'm gonna keep trying to figure that out. So maybe I'll start doing live a little more now that once I figure out this audio situation. So thank you for the open convo and transparency. Love hearing and learning about your views on different topics. Stay blessed, fam. Thank you so much. Yes, I do want to come to South Africa. My goal is to come this year. I don't know if that's gonna. Please, I want to so bad. Um, do please read The Inescapable Love of God? Probably not, but feel free to leave a synopsis of it in one of the comment sections. I'm not particularly interested in reading um, evangelical or evangelistic books at the moment. You inspired me to become a YouTuber and later become a photographer, videographer. Thank you. Absolutely, man. Glad I could play a small part in that, man. You do the rest, bro. So appreciate you. Good to see you happy and well. Nice stream. Wish I joined earlier. I'll try to do these more frequently. I don't know if I can do them every Saturday, um, but we'll try to keep this thing going. So much love to y'all, and y'all have a good evening.